All right, so picture this. You're prepping for the IELTS speaking test, and specifically part one where they hit you with those personal questions,
Yeah.
and the examiner just asks, do you like sports? How do you knock that answer out of the park, make a killer first impression? Well, that's exactly what we're diving into today.
I love it.
We're going to get into the nitty-gritty of how to handle those sports-related questions.
Absolutely. And,
Yeah.
you know, part one, it really sets the tone for the whole IELTS speaking test. So a strong start there can make a huge difference.
Right, and it's not like you have to be some sports guru either.
No, not at all.
In fact, the IELTS Mastery podcast, they made this point that the examiner isn't looking for you to be, a walking sports encyclopedia.
Right.
They want to see how well you can chat about a familiar topic. How's your fluency, vocabulary, all that good stuff.
It's all about communication skills
Mm.
and, being able to express yourself clearly and confidently on a topic that most people can relate to.
Exactly. And speaking of familiar topics, let's break down some of the common sports questions you might encounter in part one.
Sounds good.
We're talking about those classics like, do you like sports?
Wow.
What sports are popular in your country? And even, did you play any sports as a child?
Yeah, those are like the bread and butter of IELTS sports questions. And one thing that really stood out to me from the IELTS Mastering podcast was the emphasis on structure.
Oh, yeah, structure is key.
Think of it as the backbone of your answer. It's not enough to just have good content. You need to present it in a clear and organized way that makes it easy for the examiner to follow.
It's like you're building a house. You need a solid foundation.
Exactly. And if we take that first question, do you like sports? A simple yes or no answer just won't cut it.
It's like you're shutting down the conversation before it even begins.
Exactly. The IELTS Mastery podcast gives a fantastic example answer. They say, yes, I enjoy sports a lot because they help me stay fit and active. I particularly like running because it's a great way to clear my mind and challenge myself physically.
I like that answer.
Yeah, and see how it hits all the right notes. There's a direct answer, a reason, and a specific example.
And I like how they use running as their example. It's something that pretty much everyone can relate to, even if you're not, training for a marathon or anything.
Yeah, you don't need to pretend to be a hardcore athlete to answer these questions. Well, it's about finding those relatable points that you can expand on.
So, let's say the examiner asks, what sports do people in your country like to watch?
All right.
Now you got to think beyond your own personal favorites, right? What would someone from another country say about the sports that are popular where you live?
You almost have to become like a cultural ambassador for your country's sports scene.
I like that.
And the source they use cricket and football as examples, highlighting how these sports are often deeply ingrained in the culture of many nations.
Yeah, and I've noticed that too. Even mentioning specific tournaments like the World Cup can add a layer of authenticity.
Absolutely. It shows the examiner that you're, engaged with the sporting world and not just throwing out generic answers.
Yeah. It's like you're painting a picture of your country's sports culture with your words.
Exactly. All right. So now let's rewind a bit and think about those childhood sports questions.
Everyone's got a story there, right? Even if it's just from playing in the schoolyard.
Oh, absolutely. And you don't have to have been a star athlete to have something interesting to say. Even those simple playground games can be great examples.
Right.
The source uses volleyball as an example. They say, as a child, I used to play volleyball with my school team. It was a lot of fun, and I enjoyed being part of a team. It also taught me valuable lessons about cooperation and perseverance.
Nice. And I noticed they use the past tense there, which is important for showing your grammatical range.
Yes, it's subtle, but it makes a difference. And, they focused on the enjoyment and the teamwork aspects of playing volleyball rather than boasting about any awards or anything.
Right. It's a positive spin that highlights those valuable life skills.
Exactly. All right, so let's imagine now the examiner asks, what is your favorite sport to watch or play, and why?
Ooh, that's a good one.
This is your chance to really let your personality shine through and demonstrate your vocabulary.
Because I think a lot of people get stuck here. They try to come up with something super profound or, overthink it.
That's why it's so important to prepare beforehand. Think about what you genuinely enjoy about your favorite sport and why the source contrasts watching tennis with playing swimming, for example.
Okay, interesting.
With tennis, they talk about the excitement of the game, the strategy involved, even mention Wimbledon to add that extra layer of detail.
Makes sense.
And with swimming, they highlight how it's both refreshing and a great workout, showcasing a different perspective on why they enjoy it.
I see. And this is where you can really amp up your vocabulary, right? Instead of just saying tennis is fun, You could describe it as fast-paced or strategic, or maybe even talk about the thrill of a close match.
Exactly. The richer your vocabulary, the more impressed the examiner will be, and it shows that you can express yourself with precision and nuance.
Okay, so let's say the examiner asks, how often do you play or watch sports?
Right.
This seems like a simple one, but I bet there are some hidden pitfalls here.
Oh, there definitely are. A lot of people fall into the trap of giving vague answers, like sometimes or not very often.
Mm.
But the source stresses the importance of being specific.
Right?
They give an example like, I play badminton twice a week with my friends. I also watch football matches on the weekends, especially when my favorite team is playing.
I like that they gave a specific frequency and context for both playing and watching sports, and that little detail about their favorite team adds a nice personal touch.
It does. It brings the answer to life.
Yeah.
All right, let's tackle a question that often throws people off. Do you think it's important for children to play sports?
Okay. Yeah, this one's more opinion-based.
It is. So there's no right or wrong answer, but you still need to structure your response well and support your opinion with solid reasons.
You've got to make a convincing argument.
Exactly. The source provides an example where they start with a clear yes, followed by multiple reasons why they believe it's important for children to participate in sports. They talk about physical fitness, teamwork, discipline, even link sports to valuable life skills like handling success and failure.
It's like they're taking a simple yes or no question and elevating it to a whole new level.
Right. They're showing that they've thought about the topic deeply and can articulate their views in a clear and persuasive manner.
Very nice. And you know what else I thought was really helpful? Were those role play scenarios in the IELTS Mastery podcast?
Oh, those are gold.
It's one thing to read about these tips, but to actually hear how it all comes together in a simulated conversation, that's really valuable.
Absolutely. It gives you a much better sense of how these responses might sound in a real IELTS speaking test.
So should we dive into those role plays next and see how these concepts come to life?
Let's do it. I think
Sure.
our listeners will find them really insightful.
All right, let's go.
All right, so the first role play scenario from the podcast, it dives into that question. What sports do people in your country like to watch?
Okay, classic question.
And the candidate responds with, in my country, cricket is the most popular sport to watch. People are extremely passionate about it and often organize viewing parties during major tournaments. Recently, football has also gained attention, especially among the younger generation.
So what stands out to you about that response? What makes it a good answer?
Well, for starters, it's structured really well. It starts with a clear statement about cricket being the top dog. Then they back it up with evidence of this passion by talking about those viewing parties. And the transition to football's rising popularity, it's nice and smooth.
Yeah.
It shows the examiner that the candidate is aware of those trends and can connect ideas in a natural way.
It's like they're giving a little mini cultural commentary on their country's sports scene.
Yeah.
Not just listing off sports, but, actually providing some context and insights.
Exactly. And using phrases like organized viewing parties,
Yeah.
it's a nice way to showcase vocabulary beyond those basic terms like or watch.
Right. It's about showing that you've got a bit of range.
All right, so let's move on to that second role play.
Okay, what situation did they use for that one?
This one tackles the question. Did you play any sports as a child?
Ah, the childhood memories.
And the candidate answers with, yes, I used to play basketball with my school friends. It was an exciting and fast-paced game, and I loved being part of a team. Although I wasn't the best player, I always enjoyed the camaraderie.
This one feels a bit more personal, more anecdotal.
I agree. It's still well-structured.
Yeah.
They use the past tense, they provide a description of the activity.
Yeah.
But that added layer of personal reflection, that's what makes it stand out.
Right.
Admitting that they weren't a star player, but still, emphasizing that enjoyment of being part of a team, it adds a depth of honesty and self-awareness.
I think that resonates with the examiner.
It does. It shows that you're genuine and that you can reflect on your experiences.
It's like saying, hey, I'm not claiming to be some amazing athlete,
Right.
but I can still talk about my experiences in a thoughtful and engaging way.
Exactly. And it reinforces the idea that you don't need to invent these elaborate stories for the IELTS.
Right.
Drawing from genuine experiences, even simple ones, can be incredibly effective.
Okay, so we've talked about structure, personal touch. Any other key takeaways from these role plays?
Well, I think they really showcase the balance between being prepared and being authentic. You don't want to sound like you're reading from a script,
Right.
but you also don't want to ramble aimlessly.
It's about finding that sweet spot.
Exactly. And remember, these are just two examples. There are countless other sports-related questions that could come up in part one.
Oh, for sure.
The key is to be able to adapt these strategies,
Yeah.
to different scenarios and use your own experiences and interest to craft those compelling responses.
Speaking of strategies, the IELTS Mastery podcast also gives some great tips for scoring higher
Yes,
and common mistakes to avoid, right?
they did, and they're gold for anyone prepping for the speaking test.
Should we unpack those now?
Let's do it.
Yeah.
I think our listeners are eager to hear how they can boost their score and avoid those common pitfalls.
All right, let's get into it.
All right, so the IELTS Mastery podcast, they offer up some hands-on exercises to help you really solidify everything we've been talking about.
Yeah, I like that they actually give you some things to try.
Yeah. So the first exercise, it's all about self-awareness. They suggest recording yourself, answering those common sports questions we went over earlier. Like, do you like sports? And all those hits.
It's like having your own personal coach, right? You can analyze your performance and see where you can improve.
Exactly. Pay attention to your pacing, your vocabulary, even your body language.
Oh, yeah.
You might be surprised at what you discover when you see yourself from the examiner's perspective.
It's a whole different point of view.
It is. All right, so moving on to the second exercise.
Okay, what do they have us doing for this one?
This one's all about expanding your vocabulary, taking those responses to the next level and really impressing the examiner with your range of language.
Because we don't want to get stuck just using good and fun over and over again.
Right, they challenge you to brainstorm a whole bunch of sports-related vocab. Think strategy, sportsmanship, adrenaline rush, competitive spirit.
I like it.
All those words that paint a more vivid picture and show that you really get it,
Yeah, it's like you're leveling up your language skills.
Exactly. All right, and then the third exercise, this one's all about time management.
Ah, yes, the clock is ticking.
It is. You only have so much time to answer each question in part one, typically around 30 to 40 seconds. So this exercise involves actually timing yourself,
Okay.
making sure your responses are nice and concise.
You don't want to run out of time.
You don't. And they also recommend getting feedback from a friend, a teacher, a language partner, anyone who can give you an objective opinion.
Yeah, because sometimes it's hard to be your own best critic.
It is, and they can point out things you might not even notice, suggest alternative vocabulary or phrasing, just help you polish those responses.
It's like having an extra set of eyes on your work.
Exactly. All right, well, I think we've covered a lot of ground today.
We really dove deep into those common sports questions, those role play scenarios, all those practical exercises.
We had a good deep dive.
I feel like anyone listening to this is going to be well prepped for part one of the IELTS speaking test.
I agree. Remember, it's not about being a sports expert.
No.
It's about showing off those communication skills.
Right.
Talking about something familiar.
Yeah.
Using those structure tips, sprinkle in some nice vocab, and just let your personality shine through.
Be yourself.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And don't forget, practice makes perfect.
The more you practice talking about sports in English, the more confident you'll feel on test day.
Absolutely. But as you continue your IELTS journey, here's something to think about. What other sports-related topics might pop up in part one?
Yeah.
Maybe something about the role of technology in sports or the impact of sports on society.
That's a good one.
How would you adapt these strategies to those scenarios? Just something to ponder.
That's a great point to end on. It's all about being adaptable and, thinking on your feet.
You got this.
You've got the tools, the knowledge. Go out there and ace that IELTS speaking test.
We're rooting for you.
Absolutely. All right, that's it for this deep dive. Thanks for joining us, and best of luck on your IELTS journey.